In this video, I'm going to tell you again about the greatness of makeup brushes for dry brushing, but more importantly, I'm going to tell you how to clean them.
Warning, Uncle Adam is not a professional. He's usually not even very good. Try any and all of Uncle Adam's pro tips at your own risk. Void where prohibited. Uncle Adam is not actually an uncle.
So if you haven't seen the video that I did sometime last year, I think, where I talked about makeup brushes and how they make the most awesome dry brushing brushes for the hobby ever, then, pachow, go check that out and then come back here. And then I'll tell you how to clean them. And I'll tell you how to clean them because I've gotten a lot of messages from folks about how exactly do you clean these makeup brushes when you go buy them and use them as you've told us how to use them there, Uncle Adam. So, the thing is about these brushes is they're cheap. So what you do is you use them once and then you just throw them away. That's not true. But they are cheap. If you go to like a drugstore or a Walmart or a dollar store or whatever and get these brushes, like I mentioned in that video that was up in the thing, you don't want to spend, like, this is the biggest one I own and I spent $6 for it. It's the most expensive one I ever bought. Most of them are $2 to $3 or less. So if something happens to them, and this one did get a little green at one point on the end a little bit, but it's pretty much gone away. If something does happen to them, it's okay because you can throw them away and get another one. But I've had this one probably before I did that video, so it's been more than a year easy, and I use it all the time. And it's not going anywhere. I mean, individual hairs, they fly away a little bit, but because I think, cleaning it the right way, it just made sense to me the way to do it. And so, like I said, since that video, lots of questions through comments and messages and all kinds of stuff, emails even. So here you go. So there's no specific chemical or anything that you use when you're working with these things to clean them. I've never dunked them any kind of brush cleaner. I've never used any of that fancy brush soap or anything like that. What you do, because you're dry brushing with these, they should never get too much paint on them anyway. When you get a little bit of paint on your dry palette or whatever, and you just sort of dab it a little bit, you're just going to get it right there in the center, a little bit. And so you do that, and then you put it on the piece of paper and you brush it around, just like you do with a normal dry brush, to get most of it off. And then you pick up your model and you do your thing. And then when you're done, and it's now either time to go on to a different step altogether that's not dry brushing, or maybe dry brush another color or something like that, it's then time to wash this off. And all you just do is dip it just very lightly into some water and then just sort of wiggle it just a little bit. You don't want to go too deep. You don't want to soak the entire brush and get it all the way up to the metal, which I guess would be the ferrule. I should look that up and figure out how to pronounce it one of these days. But it's the metal thing at the end of the brush. You don't want to dip nearly that far. There is glue that's holding bristles into the metal part inside here. And with the cheap brushes like this, it doesn't work real well. If you've been using the dry brush technique, every once in a while you'll be like, oh, there's a hair. Oh, there's one. And they kind of fall out over time. One at a time, and there's a lot of them in there, so it's okay. But you don't want to get too much water up in there because I think over time it will start to break down the glue more, and it will shorten the life of your makeup dry brush. So once you've dipped it into that water, gotten it on there, it then goes straight to a big old piece of paper towel, and you just brush back and forth, and you just brush, up and down, back and forth, circles, everything, until you basically don't get any color that's coming off anymore. Sometimes I will dip twice, but it's not about, again, you're just getting it into just a little bit into the water and then back to the paper towel. And when it's done, it'll probably look something like this, and it will look a little rough, but that's because the hairs are sticking together because of the water. So what you have to do then, I generally take it and I just shake it real hard behind me, not towards anything because you'll get it wet, whatever, don't shake it towards your, spouse or a computer or, but you do that to, again, get some of the most excess water out of it and then set it aside someplace. Now, if you want to now do a different dry brush, it might be a good idea to get a couple of these. If you're like a speed painter who goes from dry brush color to dry brush color to dry brush color, I have a bunch. Well, I have 3 or 4. But that's the only reason I have that many. Like I said, this one's still a champ, but sometimes you do some dry brushing and then you wash the brush out and now you have to do some more dry brushing before this dries. A brush that's as big and fluffy as this can take 45 minutes to dry. The smaller little ones that you use for smaller areas, they're still makeup brushes, but not as big and floofy and honkin' as this one. those take generally a lot less time to dry. So you might want to have multiples of those as well. It depends on how speedy your speed painting is. But the idea is that you need to set it aside to dry and let it dry completely before you try using it to dry brush again, because you should never dry brush with a wet brush, which I guess makes sense, Last quick tip is that after this brush is dried, maybe it's been days, maybe it's been hours, maybe it's been weeks, who knows? Before you start to use it again, here's the big tip. Don't just immediately dunk it in some paint and start dry brushing. Take your thumb or something and just do this a lot, because there will sometimes be dried paint particles and who knows else what in there. And I've found that if I just do this and just really fluff it out, there will be dust that sometimes comes out of it. And you want that off before you go on to your next dry brushing magic trick with your terrain or your miniatures or whatever. These things work great, and you should definitely go out and get some. As I've said multiple times in the past, including on Twitch when I use these on those Necrons. I use these on pretty much everything that I paint these days. I generally use these for some step in some situation. So go out and get some, and then make sure to just dunk them in there a little bit. Make sure to get it all off on the paper, and then set it aside, and they'll last you a good long time, even for as cheap as they are.